Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another episode of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Big Hairy Chewy.
Kia ora, Pat.
Chewy, the people's hawkie. Just thought I'd put your
you
you
noticed that we change it, mate.
Yeah. It makes it really hard when I'm trying to edit fucking TikToks with your name halfway across the screen. You know what? I've got a bone to pick with you. You know what's the most difficult thing about editing TikToks with you?
What's
you've
that?
Only got a portrait window, and you talk like this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and so you're like out of screen, in shot, out of screen, in shot, and I think we're going to end up. This is a problem in our relationship. I'm just letting you know.
I'm getting a fucking talking to today, aren't I?
How's things, man? How's the day?
End of a long week for me. I have a couple of days off to head up to Wellington to see a gig, catch up with a few friends. But yeah, it's been a long week, so I am exhausted already. Looking forward to even just a long weekend, pretty much.
I haven't told people this, not that it's news, but I had a 17-year-old talking to her boyfriend in the room next to me, 17-year-old daughter, not a boarder, at 2:30 in the morning, I think on Monday morning, and I am yet to recover from it because unlike younger days when you'd go till 3 and you get up at 6 and go to work and then go till 3 the next night and get up at 6 and go, it wouldn't matter. I have not yet recovered from a broken night of sleep with teenagers talking about something ridiculous in the room next to me. So yes, I'm still getting there, but no, we'll get there. Now listen, I can see a bunch of people in the chat. I've got a bone to pick with some of you as well. I watched Bomber's show last night, and I saw many of you people coming up in his chat being shown on the screen. I saw you, Frosty. I saw you too, Ryjan, and Kiwi Skirt. A whole bunch of them. I kind of feel like they're cheating on us, Chewy. Hang on. Or is this an open relationship? Are we in an open relationship with Bomber?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I'll give them all a pass if they're just in the chat just to say, is that convicted monster Damien Grant?
We're going to have a look at some of the stuff that they were talking about on the working group tonight. We're also going to have a look at the protests going on in the US and the spreading around the world about freeing Palestine, and that's going to be a bit of a topic of conversation for tonight, and unemployment numbers as well. It's the unemployment numbers are a strange conversation because we were telling you this probably close to 12 months ago, 10 months ago, is that what happens when you bring inflation down as unemployment goes up. So is it the fault of this government? Well, yes and no. I mean, they aren't doing more to save jobs, but it kind of comes with the territory of bringing inflation down and unemployment goes up. I mean, they're actually actively making more people unemployed, especially in the public sector, whilst taking pay rises, I should say. But yeah, we'll have a look at what's going on because people aren't all that happy about it. And of course, after Chewy, we had a bit of a crack at the Prime Minister last night for being telling us it was so hard to kick people out of their kāinga ora houses. That's done a bit of a round of the internet today, so we'll have a look at that as well. But firstly, we have a little bit of news. I'm going to start the news by doing something. Oh, gosh, by doing something. If I had my computer ready, I'd do it. I'm doing it. It's coming. By doing something like this. Huge thanks to all of our patrons. When I said a week and 2 days ago, we would like to try and get 50 more patrons. And I'm not saying this just to get someone go, you've got 50 now. We're at 49, Chewy. 8 days into it. So I'm not saying that to get people to jump on right now. Look, the truth is, if you can't really afford to do it, I'd rather you didn't, because we're going to project into the future on doing some things based on things like patronage. So if you can't really afford it, it's almost better for you. Do a super chat, if you want. But rather than committing to this, what we want people to do is to commit to this who can kind of stick with us for a while, because it helps us kind of decide how we're going to move through the next month, 2 or 3 or 4. So this is not like a hard sell to get just one more person, because that 50 was an arbitrary number, didn't really mean anything. It could have been 40, it could have been 60. So don't just jump on now if you're not absolutely keen and been thinking about getting on board. But a huge thanks to the 49 people who have so far signed up in the last 8 days. There are a bunch of them on here. There are so many of them on here that I can't actually read them off the billboard. I'll go and read them off the actual Patreon page, which I've just turned back on then. All of these people are beautiful. I think Liam is a new one, and there's one here with Kylie. Kylie is someone who's been with us for a while, but she had upped herself. She had uppered herself to Super Patreon, and we hadn't changed it on the board. That's just a clerical error, Kylie, and we apologise for that. But Kylie's in there as well. She upped her patronage. Daryl and Piripi, and there's other people in here. Peter upped his one as well. And here is more as well here again. Gracie and John, I'm pretty sure, are new. When I say pretty sure, it's because I'm going to go read them. And we've got an official, this is the only one I wanted to mention, we officially have a pirate now as one of our patrons, because you can see this one here, Roger, one. Now let me just read out some names, because I do want to, even if I've already said your name, these are the people who are done in the last 48 hours. Liam George, Nat Jump, James, Paula, and I'm only using the name that they want put up on the board. And so Paula, I think it's Hugh G65, Daryl Pentecost, Roger 1, John McFagan, I'm going to go with, or McFadden it might be, Piripi Curtis, Gracie Buchanan, and Frosty, Frosty, that harlequin of a person who likes to jump between internet news shows and thinks that they can go and thinks that we're okay to lose them across to someone else for an evening. I don't know how I feel about that. But you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of what we do. And if you do want to be a part of what we do, it's super simple to do. You know how to do it. You head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Now, I've had a few people come, and in fact, I've actually realised there's one more patron as well, who was before the 50. There are some people who are saying, I haven't got enough to do a patronage, but I'd like to give something. There's been a couple of people on the way through who we've stuck our bank account out to, if they wanted to do something small or something one-off, or they didn't want to pay the fees to Patreon. They just want to do it as a direct debit. There's a couple of people who have done that as well. So if you're one of those, feel free to email us, bighairynews@gmail.com. And I was going to say something really pithy, like we'll happily take your money. It's actually, I don't want to be pithy about it. I don't want to be silly about it, because it's actually really a genuinely helpful thing, and we really do genuinely appreciate it. The other thing to remind you of is you've got about 48 hours to get into this, the April-May merch drop. And we're talking a bit about the Gaza protests today, so it's probably appropriate once again to talk about our selective buffer gear for this month only. So basically by the end of tomorrow night's show, this buffer gear will go away forever. Remember, everyone who purchases buffer gear this year, you don't only support us, but we're also donating money to medical aid for Palestinians. So 25% of the profits from any of the buffer gear bought, we are going to donate to MAP, Medical Aid for Palestinians. Now, this is what I'll say. If you're also now buying merch just to support MAP, then don't buy merch. Just go give your money straight to MAP. No problems with that. But if you want to support us and MAP, then you can go and get some merch. And also, of course, the ready merch is up there again for the normal stuff. You can get your name on it. You can get your name on the T-shirts. You can get straight T-shirts or straight hoodies as well. And and I'll tell you something, Chewy. There's been some conversation today about other kinds of merch. Now, if you're a patron, or you follow me on Twitter, or you follow the Facebook page, all places you can find us, you'll have already seen this. Sure, you've already seen this. But someone has suggested that we might want to bring out a range of key rings. And when someone said in the chat last night, Luxon looks like White Grimace, we've had a few people talk to us about that.
As soon as you sent that to me, Pat, that did the rounds of my social media. It's just well done.
Yeah.
Well done,
so
man.
Well, I would say thanks, Matt. I'm not going to. I think Matt's not saying he has to be anonymous with it, but he does work in media, and I've talked to him. So I'll just say thanks, Matt. He drew this up, and he sent it to us. It's brilliant, and I don't know if I can zoom in on this, but if I can I zoom in on this? Oh, I can. The thing that's most brilliant about it, is the hairs. Look at the hairs You know, it's the hairs on it. That's the thing that makes me most kind of go, that is...
The
that
only
is...
thing that would make that worse is if he was, for some reason, wet.
I
But
actually
the
thought...
hair up there.
Lots of people talked about nutsack. It looked like a nutsack. So if it had to come around and gone up a bit and then down a bit, then that probably would have been worse as well. But, you know, thank you, Matt, for the white grimace. But you know, Chewy, it's kind of cool, actually. We've also had white grimace. And the thing that I love about this cartoony one is look at the skin liver spots.
The skin tone. Oh.
It's just...
Oh.
It's just because that I believe that is his skin. I believe it's just been spread out. And what about one more just for fun? White grimace. And the badges say, "Keep calm, I'm the boss, and I'm just like you, and greed is good." Now, I really want to apologize to the person who sent this through. I had a full-on boomer moment where I lost this in my phone and I couldn't figure out how to go back and get it. And then somehow I found it in one of my messages and I saved it. And I'm like, oh, good, I've saved it. And I swiped back and then I went and sent it myself and I came back and I couldn't find where I saved it from. So I've had a very, very boomer afternoon. So this is you. Please out yourself in the chat because we want to say a big thanks to either of you guys who have sent these us as well. So, but yes, then there was also a conversation around perhaps a BHN keyring series. And someone mentioned, what about the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang mixed with David Seymour? And I thought, oh, that's not bad. I quite like that one as well. So we're working on merch, guys. We're working on more things, more tat to flick on to you. You're just a part of this. Oh, also, let me say thanks to Peter and to Sandy. I'm just reading it over there, who have upped their membership in the last wee while for our Patreon as well. But there's kind of my big introduction for the show to scare people with horrible imagery of white grimace. Hashtag white grimace.
White grimace. Maybe Seymour could be the Hamburglar.
Oh, you think we could? Oh, well then who would be Ronald? Who's the clown? There you go.
Who's the clown? Fuck,
Hamburglar. Yeah, that's not
too many
options.
Actually,
yeah,
you have to go back into the archive of the old crew for the old playground. There's Grimace, there's Mayor McCheese, the Hamburglar. I don't know. Yeah. The Hamburglar's too easy. That's got to be Seymour.
Oh, there you go. It was Kylie. Kylie sent in the liver spot grimace.
Nice.
But it was made by Nat Jump. Oh, Nat Jump made it, but Kylie sent it in. Oh, there you go. This is like teamwork. It was lovely last night, just to tell you guys, it was lovely last night when we had on Mark Hale and everyone in the chat. It does really feel like a group of people going, we like you, to Mark Hale and to her mum and that sort of thing. So thanks for caring for one another in our chat. Now all the righties in our chat are going, no, fucking wokesters. Whatever, Trevor. It's a good time. Hey, let's start talking about topics that we're going to talk about, shall we? We'll start topicking the talking points now, I think. And I think that the unemployment numbers are something we need to talk about. I'm not saying this to defend what the government is doing, but we did, whoever was in government this term was going to see unemployment numbers go up. But the feeling that I'm getting is this government, shall we say, is particularly good at having unemployment numbers go up. In fact, if they've got a skill, so unemployment numbers for them aren't necessarily a byproduct, but a target. That's the difference. Like if Labour was in now, unemployment would be going up, but it would be a byproduct of inflation coming down as opposed to a target to reach, which it feels like for this lot. So we're not giving them a pass. We're also not saying it's completely on their shoulders because unemployment numbers are going to go up when inflation comes down. But yeah, this seems to be the aim for the National Party, and it would be a byproduct for the Labour Party. That's probably, is that a fair way of putting it, True? That feels like a pretty accurate way of putting the difference.
Yeah, it does feel about right.
Yeah. All right. So let's have a look with Simon Zello on fewer roles and more people are competing for those fewer roles.
More Kiwis are out of work. The latest data confirming just how tough it is. With unemployment up, more people are now competing for fewer roles as the job market gets squeezed. 10,000 people lost their jobs in the first 3 months of the year. Stats NZ figures showing unemployment rose from 4% to 4.3% in the March quarter. But it's actually much worse than that. In April, thousands more people were laid off, with the Reserve Bank forecasting the unemployment rate will rise to 5% this year.
Yep.
And as business correspondent Katie Bradford reports, protesters have been out in force marching against the public sector job cuts.
And of course, it's May Day, 1st of May, so that's all kind of tied in together.
A May Day tradition, workers taking to the street. As an increasing number of Kiwis lose their jobs or worry they'll be next.
Workers are fearing that by tomorrow there will be no jobs for them. A government with a conscience will keep people in the job rather than removing them.
Slightly unfortunate surname for someone in the union, MAGA, but I mean, just an observation.
From the workforce.
That sentiment echoed in the capital, where the government slashing of the public sector is hitting the hardest.
They did not vote for people losing their job. They did not vote for the cruelty that people are seeing.
Despite unemployment being on the rise, government departments have been told to find savings to pay for promised tax cuts. The One News Varian poll asked what people made of the reduction to the number of public servants. While over a third thought there'd been too much trimming, a similar proportion thought the cuts were about right. And when adding that result to those that wanted them to go further, well, more than half were happy with the cuts or wanted more.
So this is, I believe, not to say it's a good result, but National and ACT have done well furthering the narrative of we just can't afford this. Like it's like when you strip away all the colours from your political parties and coming up to an election, you just get people to pick the actual policies they like. Quite often they come out with quite a different position than they would if they had have always been like, well, I'm just a Labour voter or I'm just an ACT voter. Like if you strip all those colours away, you often get a different result. It feels like if you'd stripped all the bullshit away from we can't afford this whilst giving $3 billion to landlords, like if we had the actual truth out there as the narrative, I suspect those results would be different. I can't prove that, but I just think that the government, National and ACT primarily, I don't want to say have done well, because that sounds like I'm saying it's good, have been effective in a layer of bullshit on the story that I think has probably influenced this poll, Chewy.
Yeah, and it's very... bullshit can be some accurate chart, but without context. Oh, look at this massive explosion of public sector workers. Don't show the fact that it very closely matches the increase in population. Don't give it the context of the massive amount of stuff that had to go into public health messaging and that sort of thing because of our COVID response, and then the ramping down of those numbers. Don't show those things. But now when it comes down to it and they have to back up this rhetoric that they've built up of this enormous fat in the system, then we find, customs, border security staff, frontline health workers, all getting slashed. And exactly what we talked about last year at the election when this rhetoric was doing the rounds, is that they're going to be toughening up MSD sanctions. They're going to make it harder to get benefits and support, and then they're going to push a whole bunch of people out into the arms of those systems.
Yep.
They have built a machine to chew people, and that's what we're going to see.
Yep, and I like it. What we did with Craig Rennie on Monday night, actually talking through what the information was. I was actually a bit surprised the amount of positive response we had from him, especially when we were talking about $50 billion under National, $25 billion under Labour, what we got for it under Labour, what we got for it under National. I'm if I had a thought about it, maybe I would have said, but I'm surprised at the fervour that you guys, people on Twitter, were like, can we please have that clip? Can you get that clip up? Because it cuts through the bullshit. Then all you've really got is nah from people, which did happen. But when you show people the information, I was just looking through my Twitter feed. I haven't found it, but someone sent a graph I like it on my Twitter feed where people talk to each other. And what we find is you people who are watching and listening to this, you come in and battle the trolls. And I quite like that because I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter after I put my stuff out there. I've got too much going on. And there was one today that showed costings for how much was spent on infrastructure. And it went red lines, Labour, 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 and then national government under John Key, it was all like down almost zero, and then back up for Labour. So it's this idea that a new national government will go, my God, they spent 10 times as much as we did. And it's like, yeah, you were probably spending 20 times less than you should have been. But they don't delve into the numbers. It's like this whole public servants conversation. They're just saying too much, too much, too much. They're not acknowledging or even investigating or even having the conversation was maybe this 14,000 number, maybe it is too much, but certainly where you had was too little. Maybe 10,000 was the right number. So actually, if National was being honest and they sacked, and I'm not saying I'm liking this, I'm just trying to talk it out, 4,000 of them, and that would then be at a number which was fair, because certainly in a national government, you don't have enough public servants. You don't have enough people in that industry. And then maybe under Labour, you have more than you need. Like if I was going to vote for something, I'd rather have more than I need than not enough. But obviously all of us would mostly want the right and the best number. Remember, bigger government's not better. Smaller government's not better. Better government is better. And that's, I think, what we all want to aim for. Should we keep going, sir?
Exactly. Yep. Crack on.
We'll keep going.
13% weren't sure.
Our government was elected with a really clear mandate to reprioritise government spending.
A One News tally of job cuts shows about 5,000 jobs have been lost across the public and private sectors in the last few.
So that's interesting that 5,000 jobs have been lost and the unemployment number is what, 10,000? Now, I'm assuming that 5,000 jobs, a bunch of them sometimes are jobs that are currently vacant and they're not refilling. But that's still going to be let's say half of them, that's still going to be perhaps a quarter. Let's say 2,500 were actually individuals and 2,500 were jobs not to be filled. That's 25% of the unemployed at the moment. That's not nothing, and that's what I'm saying, that for the national government, this feels like a target for unemployment, whereas under Labour, it would feel more like a byproduct, unemployment, as inflation comes down, because it is one of the byproducts of that happening. I mean, if this government has contributed 15, 20, 25%, even 10% of the number of unemployed people today, then that's a big concern. It's a big concern, especially, and we'll keep saying this, when they could have kept going for the time being as to where they were, rather than giving $3 billion back to landlords, Chewy. They could have easily kept on going if they wanted to, but they don't want to, because it's a target for them,
that money,
not a byproduct.
There's that money. There's also other money that's been identified, but, they would rather absolutely rip through people's lives and absolutely have a negative effect on how people are going to deal with government departments going forward. Yeah. Because there aren't, recent news, it's going to take, 2-3 months to get a new passport? I'm sure them slashing public sector workers is going to improve that through, I assume, magic. Yeah. Magic, fairy dust, and fairy bread. Wishy thinking.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole way through, like when you're talking about measures of we've got to bring down inflation, that sort of thing. And, last year you had banks going, oh, we reckon 20,000 people need to lose their jobs. And it's like, well, that's a real blunt instrument to do that. That's like, well, we've got three options. The first one is we can sack a whole lot of people. Stop right there. I've heard everything I want to hear. Perfect. Yeah. Let's do that. There are other tools in the box. And again, sort of coming back from a multi-generational challenge like the pandemic response like that, the payoff is we had to make drastic action. We supported you through that to stop it. And there's kind of a hangover to that. It's not like it was never going to be, cool, back to normal. Everything's fine now. Everything's like it was beforehand. Yeah. And that could be the unemployment rate. That could be the rate of inflation. But when we talk about this this cost of living crisis. It's only a cost of living crisis for us.
Yeah.
The businesses are still making the profits.
Yep.
The supermarkets are still making their profits. The banks are still making their profits. They're making money hand over fist, just like they have all the way through. The only people doing it tough is us. And the only people that are paying the price are the people that are going to lose their jobs to make sure that inflation comes down while maintaining those fat P&L statements for these companies.
You talk about the banks making their profits, and it comes up in this conversation about cost of living and people cutting their cloth. I've just rolled over. I'm very, very lucky. I have a very considerably lower mortgage than many people. Certainly if you lived in Auckland or Christchurch or Wellington. But my figures have just rolled over. And I'm paying $150 a week more. Now, some people are going to laugh at that and kind of go, "Bah, I'm paying $800 a week more." I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it, but still $650 more a month on a small mortgage is not insignificant. It's not like, oh, sweet as, I had that in change down the back of the couch anyway. So people who are in Auckland or have recently bought houses, and are seeing that interest rate jump when they're refixing, I can't see. Like, honestly, if I was your average house price in Auckland, you'd multiply that by about 4. So yeah, that it could be if you had $1 million, it could be $600 a week more than what you're already paying.
Yeah, more. There's news recently this week that more people are missing their mortgage payments or reaching out to their banks for payment plans and stuff like that.
Yep.
That's only going to increase.
Yeah,
like people have been refixing. They might have locked in for 2 or 3 years, and now those are coming due, and some of those are big jumps.
Yeah, that was me. I was on about 4%, and it's now I'm actually floating today, and it's 8.5, and I'm about to fix for 6 months, and it's about 7.3. And the reason I'm only fixing for 6 months is it's not going to be higher than that. I mean, there's a 3-year one for 5.99 at the moment. I think that as interest rates come down and the OCR slows down, the rates at the bank will slow down. By the way, this is not financial advice for anybody watching. This is just my thoughts, what I'm doing. So I'm only going to fix for 6 months and then reassess, because I think it will continue to trend down. Unfortunately, as unemployment continues to trend up, and that's a part of this equation around inflation as well. We'll keep going, We'll keep seeing what these guys have got to say in this cheery story.
Months. And while we've now hit the highest unemployment rate in 3 years, it's expected to keep climbing.
Unfortunately, the medicine to get rid of inflation is you beat the economy up. That means weak growth, that means less profits, that means less tax, that means pressure on government, local authorities, means pressure on households, and unfortunately it means a higher unemployment rate, and there's going to be both economic and social consequences.
Most of the decisions this government are making are contributing to making that worse rather than making it better. They're making bad choices. They don't need to be laying off a whole lot of people right now.
These students were wandering past the Wellington protest and decided to join in.
It's unfortunate, really. Like, you see how many people here are clearly affected by that.
I just say to any New Zealander who loses their job, we sympathise with you, and we want this to be an economy where you face good opportunities.
Because it's hard for all of us. Before the election, I couldn't take my children to the movies. But now, with my pay rise and my $400,000, $300,000, I think I can sneak by. So I feel your pain. We're with you, New Zealand. We're with you.
Listen to us, because we matter.
Voices hoping to be heard before more of them join the job-seeking queue.
As we heard, Katie, unemployment is expected to keep rising. The Reserve Bank saying, 5% this year. In your crystal ball, just how high is it likely to go?
Well, this is also slightly higher than was expected, that 4.3%. And as always, the people who are hit hardest are women, young people, Māori Pacifica. Those are the ones who are losing their jobs first. Wages are still growing slightly, and that has slowed down as well. No surprises there. People are still getting pay rises, just not as high as we saw. But there is more bad news to come. The Reserve Bank predicting unemployment to hit about 5%. Other economists saying 5.2% by the end of the year. Crucially, though, 5.5% by the end of next year. That is thousands and thousands more Kiwis expected to lose their jobs. Tough times ahead.
People also facing tough times when it comes to mortgage repayments.
Yes, the Reserve Bank also released today its 6-monthly financial stability report that looks at how well banks and financial institutions can weather against economic shocks or climate change, etc. Big shocks, basically. But it touched on that issue of mortgage holders finding themselves in distress. Now, these are people who may have had to change the way they pay for their mortgages. They took out big loans and simply can't afford them right now. A lot of those people are worried about their jobs or losing their jobs, losing hours, etc. And that number is creeping up, the number of people in arrears. It was about 0.2% in 2022. It's gone up to 0.5%, expected to go up from there again over the next little while. Not as high as the GFC, but that's still not good news if you're any of those people. The Reserve Bank also touched on that unemployment rate today. Not surprised by it. The economy is cooling. It needs it to cool to battle inflation. That, of course, means interest rates are probably going to stay high until early next year. But we'll have more of that from the Reserve Bank in a couple of weeks' time when they release their next OCR decision. And that comes just before the budget, where, of course, the pressure is on the government to do something to relieve some of the pressure from people.
All eyes on that space. Thanks very much for that, Kate.
There you go, Chewy. That's pretty much the story. There's more to show about this, which I will show about this as well, including they talked about what the polls were looking at for this week as well, the reaction to the poll, and also just want to point out once again how hard this has been for the politicians, Chewy. We're going to do that as well in this part of the conversation. But you have a crack first, sir.
I have a couple of things to point out. Like, they will always, and I understand the reasons why, they will always talk about these things in terms of percentage points, and it's gone up 0.2%, and mortgage defaults and all of that sort of stuff. Every one of those little fractions of a percentage is a real family, is a real person.
Dozens of real families.
Yep. And that's why I've had such a visceral reaction to Nicola Willis being somewhat gleeful at times of swathes of public servants losing their jobs, and other ministers, almost crowing about the death of News Hub and all of this sort of stuff. It is someone's life getting upended. We think of the numbers, we don't think of the people. And it's something that I read a wee while ago. I think this was the late 80s, early 90s, when the huge sackings of major businesses. I think in the late 80s, factories closed and state-owned enterprises being sold off and people laid off and that sort of thing. The effect that has on the community, and I don't sort of mean like the economic depressive effect. I mean the depressive effect it has on a community. It was so brutal here in New Zealand. It was something that was studied. How did these small communities that were built around, say, a sawmill or an engineering works or something like that, and then suddenly you get 500 people all unemployed on the same day.
Yeah.
And maybe they're the main breadwinner and that sort of thing. That ripple effect that goes through a community. And I think that back in that time, that was a lot more contained because we weren't as connected by communication as we are now. You'll see that depressive effect online on people's Facebooks and stuff like that. I don't think there's any consideration of that. And then they're going to go, potentially these people... people in quite well-paying jobs, look, they can jump to another media organisation, they can jump to a lobby group or something like that. But as this carries on down the line, it is always the guys with the more menial jobs or that sort of thing, that there just isn't something for them.
But that's even within the media organisations you're talking about. And I know what you're saying, because this happened with Today FM, right? And for different reasons, but it shut down. And we sat here and went, Tova will be fine, and Lloyd will be fine, and Duncan will be fine. And we're right, that's true. But then they all had producers. There was engineers in there, and there's only, if you've got an engineer making jingles for your station and that kind of stuff, there's only a certain number of jobs around that they are. If you've got someone answering the phones, Today FM, that's not necessarily a skill set that you can go out and keep doing other things. The one different thing that there is now, though, Chewy, is let's use, I mean, I don't know him personally, but let's use Lloyd as an example, because he's had the double whammy. He was picked up very quickly by TV3, easy, moved on, kept working at it, and now TV3 shutting down. And because TV3 News Hub's shutting down, even those people in those positions that can just jump between stations, like you're saying, may not be able to now. Now, that's not necessarily the fault of the government, but that's indicative of the current environment of unemployment, of work, and work that there's not. So it's going to be even harder still, even for some of those people up the top, quote unquote, to jump around, because as the story said, more people applying for fewer jobs. That's the same in that world as well. 50 people are now applying for that presenting job rather than 12, so I think, and I know that those people are, they've had big salaries for a long time, and many of us will go, would love to have that money, but they just, there's still people who live by how they cut their cloth. Most of us, if we were all of a sudden went on to a $200,000 salary, our living would probably change somewhat. You get accustomed to it, you then lose your job, and okay, so you're struggling now to pay your mortgage in Parnell rather than South Dunedin, but proportionally it still may be very much the same for them, even though they look so much better off because they drive an Audi and live in Parnell.
Yeah. So I mean, this is giving me flashbacks to my upbringing, right? In the late 80s, my dad worked in a cool store for Waddies, or I think it was McCain's actually at that point. And my mum worked part-time for the IRD. Now, they got both laid off in the same year.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember the effect that had. And that factory, that cool store, laid off hundreds in Timaru. And yeah, you went to whatever the Ministry of Social Development was there, social welfare, whatever, and everybody's got cap in hand. And that was repeated throughout a whole bunch of towns, ports around New Zealand. And it was just like those people were paying the prices of decisions made much further up the food chain than they were. Yeah. And that's the thing. It will travel down, and then there will be people at the bottom of the pile will meet the mean, hard machinery of government that has been told to cut costs and keep people off our lists.
Yep.
That is a scary, scary thing.
Yeah. No, and look, it'll go on. And now let's just have a couple other thoughts over this, because we talked about this last night. I'm not suggesting, Chewy, that people followed our lead, but there was lots of people today making it very clear about this current government crying at how hard it was for them to have to put in policies to then kick that person out of their home. And it's actually someone mentioned the empathy for this government was indicative within those polls. I think every time Luxon White Grimace opens his mouth, we are seeing an element of this. I mean, it honestly feels like he's saying, but what about me? You're not even thinking how I feel about having to throw people out on the road.
Well, it's not positive at the moment because we're having to make some pretty tough decisions. It's not easy when you've got people losing their jobs in the public service. It's not easy, right? I know it's tough for those individuals, but it's not easy for a government to actually drive through that program as well. It's not easy to actually put sanctions on beneficiaries not holding their obligations on job seeker benefit. It's not easy to evict unruly tenants out of KO. So I get all of that, right? But we have a hell of a mess to fix. We are going to turn the show around.
Turn it around by cutting jobs with one hand and taking pay rises with the other.
There you go. So that's the vibe that's been going around. So again, I would like to just echo the words of the great saint Chue. He's not very good at this.
Maybe we need some synchronicity here. Obviously, famously, Michael Joseph Savage helped the first family move into the first state house,
socialist,
carrying their kitchen table in through the door.
Mm-hmm.
If Luxon thinks it's hard to evict KO tenants, and by the way, I'm not going to, I did it. I swore I wouldn't do this. I'm not going to fall into this lazy trap of avoiding saying Kaingaora. He's going to say KO wherever he gets the chance. But yes, what I was saying is maybe if he understands how hard it is to evict people, maybe he should go round and do it and have the same sort of photo op that Michael Joseph Savage had, but in reverse, where he kicks the door in, grabs the kitchen table and throws it out onto the street.
I think this is the picture you're probably talking about.
Yep.
Shot at the opening of a Labour government's first state house in Miramar, Wellington, 1937. This is one of New Zealand's iconic photographs. Prime Minister Michael Joseph Savage lifts a cumbersome dining table through a cheering throng towards the house's threshold. So this is the thing, right? And we've said this for a long time. There's a policy that New Zealand will not give up. Yes, there are some far-right lunatics who want to get rid of it, but in general, New Zealand will not give up this safety net, right? And you go through more public health. You go through more working for families. You go through more interest-free student loans. These things that New Zealand will not give up. Left-wing government, left-wing government, left-wing government, left-wing government. The left make policy. The right respond to policy, and I've added a new line to this, Chewy, or they try and reuse failed policies from the past. I mean, I've said
we
this.
saw that very clearly this time round.
Yeah, and I've asked for this 20 times. Tell me a right-wing government's policy that New Zealanders hold on to as tightly as they do some of those left-wing ones that I've just listed, because I'm still yet to think of one. A bit of a tangent from your tangent there, Chewy.
It's real hard to beat socialised healthcare, welfare state, state schools, state housing, nuclear free. There's a lot there. You know, let's throw Winnie a bone. Gold card. That probably won't go away.
We got to stop bullshitting about the gold card. All the gold card was, let me be really blunt, because when he promised the gold card, he promised like it would actually give you better rewards and stuff. Like, in other words, it would be a better discount card. Or I've got this thing on my phone, right? This is basically the gold card. Hopefully I'll give away no details. I've got this thing on my phone. You can probably see that all the little, it's called Stow card or store card, right? And you just now go to your New World one and it's there. Or you go to your AA Smart Fuel and it's there. So you don't have to have all those cards in your wallet anymore. That's what the gold card was. It was just a singular card that amalgamated all the other specials and cards that were already there. It's useful, but it's not life-changing like Winston said it would be.
I'm not saying necessarily it is, but people do love it. I see the glee in people's eyes when they come into the shop going, I've got my gold card. I've finally got my gold card.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about that from a purely like recognition point of view.
Sure. Look, I mean, it does something, but when he was launching it, they were talking about it will give you like specials on electricity that no one else can get. It will give you all these other things, and it did none of them. I do want to talk to one other thing. It's kind of we're kind of moving away from it, but it was a part because TVNZ is still showing their polling. And this is the response to their, I mean, we were very critical of this in some ways. Response to the polling. TVNZ political poll coverage PM, former Labour MP criticised political editor's report, broadcaster dealing with 50 formal complaints. And 50 complaints is actually a significant amount when you're working in media. TVNZ said it's dealing with about, it is, because you multiply it by, it used to be 7 in radio. Every complaint you get, you multiply it by 7. So that would be, I don't know what it would be in TV, but, 500 people. But the thing that they're complaining about, Chewy, is exactly what we said. So actually, before you start poo-pooing it, just listen to what it's about. Sorry, you go. Yep.
Yeah, all right. But my criticism of that report was the fact that it echoed exactly how all of those polls were presented last year in the run-up to the election. They were overly blown out. The language used on them was extremely hyperbolic.
But that's what the complaints are about.
Yeah. And then these complaints, now we're getting complaints. We weren't getting them last year when they were talking about Labour tanking. But when the same thing happens now there's complaints. And also, they're being directed at Mikey. I saw the other reports on those poll results from Tova, that Tova was just as frothy over it. They all were, because they're all doing the same thing. They're blowing out these to have a headline, to have a major news event. And they need to tone it down, and they need to give it the trend and the context. It's the same thing that we've been saying. I find it interesting that this is 50 complaints directed at Mikey.
Well, I look, I'm not going to challenge you. You might be right. But I would say the one difference with this one is the hyperbole used around they wouldn't be in government. And I think that's really what the complaints are about, because it's 2.5 years away from the next election. Let me read a bit of it, and then we'll see if we come to an agreement or if we're breaking up tonight. TVNZ says it's dealing with about 50 formal complaints over its coverage of the latest One News Varian political poll, with some viewers, as well as the Prime Minister and a former senior Labour MP, critical of the tone of the 6 p.m. report. TVNZ political editor Mikey Sherman's reporting of the poll results, all 3 parties that make up the coalition government have lost support, was described by Prime Minister Christopher Luxon earlier today as a little frothy and sensationalist. Among various adjectives, metaphors and analysis, Sherman variously described a nightmare poll for the coalition that would absolutely rock the entire parliament. She introduced her report with the words, "Political turbulence ahead, buckle up, brace for impact." National Act New Zealand First were down behind the combined support of Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, and Sherman described how, bang, Winston Peters' party on 4% will be out of Parliament at what could be a May Day for the coalition. So you're right. I mean, we don't know if there was complaints last year because they weren't talked about. I think one of the differences is, though, this is saying these guys are out of Parliament if the election was held today. It's just, it feels a bit different. And I think what the complaints are about is actually what we were critical of the whole thing about, which is that exact thing. I don't need to see the seats in Parliament. You know, we said it fine. I don't need to see they've got 48 seats. What I do think is valid from the poll, as we've said, is actually this is the worst political poll for an incumbent government within 6 months under the MMP system. And so what's actually happened, unfortunately, Chewy, is there are a bunch of naysayers who are now sort of able to pigeonhole this poll and blame the rhetoric as opposed to look at the analysis of it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because there is some things to learn from this. And the things are, people are unhappy on some level with this government. They're more unhappy with them today than before the election. And because certain commentators are able to go, blah, it doesn't mean anything. It's 2.5 years. Look at how, she was saying they're out, and actually focus on Mikey, fairly or unfairly, has actually taken away a little bit of what is actually some interesting analysis from that poll.
Yeah. I mean, this is something we've been talking about. One of the things that we set this up to do was comment on the commentators, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think when it comes to the way of presenting those polls and the way that the language is used in it, they're off base. Give people context. You sort of have to dig for the thing of like, well, this is a really bad result because when you compare it to the first 6 months of previous governments, this is a pretty frightening trend.
Yeah.
Is just as an impactful statement without going down the path that all of the commentators have been about this poll.
Yeah.
Because it's that first one. And I get it. You want to be sensationalist. But when people have, rightly or wrongly, quite strong criticisms of the media at the moment, then maybe listen to some of those criticisms. They want to see the integrity that they definitely have. They want to be informative. They want to educate. All of these things. Give it the context. You can do it in the same amount of time, I guarantee you. Yep.
And like I said, there were some valuable things to talk about in that poll. Whether it's nefarious or not, some people have been able to look past the valuable things and focus on only the hyperbole. Whereas we said, this hyperbole is bullshit, let's ignore that. And then we talked about the interesting things in the poll. Others use that as an excuse not to. Anywho, let me look, a few super chats that have come in because we do need to move on some other things as well. Mr. Arvid, thank you, sir. Here's a friendly reminder, David Seymour is worst. Frosty, I don't know how we feel about this one, Chewy, but Frosty says, late fee, sorry for cheating on you fellas. Saw Frosty pop up a couple of times, I think. Gold says reprioritize government spending. Sounds like move money around, not this slash and burn approach. Thank you for the super chat. Nick says, surprise, I'm late. Here's some money. And everyone should hit like. Sure. One here that is from, says the short one. They force unemployment, then punish the unemployed. Yeah, that's an that's a astute way to look at it. Peter says for $2, we should call homeless communities Luxonvilles. We've got a Luxembourg, so Luxonville mightn't be too bad. Is there anything else you want to share, or can we move on to the US story at Columbia University?
Yeah, no, let's have a look at that shit show.
So this has been going on for a week or so now. We haven't really touched on it here so much. I've been keeping quite a good eye on it. I think the majority report, and especially Emma Vigeland at the moment, is doing really good commentary on what's going on. So if you want to get like if people wanted to know what was happening with Luxon and they were in America, they could come to us. If you want to see what's going on with the Columbia University, you've got some really good commentators online. Majority Report's one of them. The guys from the Vanguard Report, if you want to check them out, they're doing daily updates on this. But it's escalated significantly in the last 24 hours. So let's have a look what's happening at the moment.
Students in New York are accusing police of brutality after specialist units wearing riot gear stormed a barricaded building at Columbia University. Around 100 pro-Palestinian protesters have been arrested after officials at the campus decided the 2-week standoff had gone too far. US correspondent Logan Church reports.
Riot shields raised. The NYPD's tactical task force breaches the building blockaded by students. A protest for peace in Gaza broken by force.
You want to speak to it first?
I just want to say it's disgusting. That's all.
That they breached the building?
They look like they're about to storm Fallujah.
Yeah. Well, that's how American police do it, isn't it? They don't want to, because it's for my safety. Hands out of your pockets for my safety. Like, well, you're the fucking dude with the gun and the shield. How about hands off the gun for my safety? That might be a better idea. All right.
Back it up. That means you. Back up. Dozens dragged from the building and campus zip-tied before being loaded onto waiting buses. NYPD, KKK, IOF, you're all the same. Meanwhile, the tent village swarmed by police. Large groups of armed police and riot gear descended on Columbia University earlier this evening, quickly establishing cordons right around the campus. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters came out to meet them in the streets. Students moved on or arrested. Just hours earlier, instead of leaving as ordered by university officials, demonstrators doubled down, breaking into and occupying the historic Hamilton Hall, barricading it with table and chairs, even scaling the roof.
We were part of making this victory possible.
Supporters gathered outside the campus today.
I think that it's fantastic. I think it deserves protests.
Although counter-protesters cried out too.
If people have committed crimes, I think they should be arrested and they should be, charged.
We shall not be moved. Come on, let's go. We gotta go.
It seems university officials were listening. The 2-week protest escalating to the point where they felt forced to agree with the city's mayor and ask for help.
We cannot wait till this situation becomes even more serious. This must end now.
But this may not be over yet. As with previous protests, crackdowns have only triggered new demonstrations nearby, with a burning question of whether a response like this will only make things worse.
So that's the story from Logan Church. I've got another part of the story, which is what's happening in New Zealand to support what's happening in New York, which we'll play in a minute. But Chewy, let's speak to the first part of it, which are the protests happening at Columbia University in New York.
This is something obviously that's happening throughout universities in the States. And the one thing that has been in common with all of them is a massive, disproportionate police response. From Texas to Ohio to Uvalde, They're here in New York and that sort of thing, as we see. And I just think that's a really interesting microcosm of what's actually happening in Gaza, which is a massive, disproportionate show of force against people that cannot respond to it.
Well,
this
and
is
also people who
happening.
can respond. Also, people who can respond to it. Did you hear about Jill Stein, who was, I mean, she won't get anywhere, but technically as a candidate for president of the United States, she was arrested at one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting perspective. Yeah.
I mean, this is all happening on the eve of the Israeli forces doing their final push on Rafah. 1.7 million people squeezed into something the size of a single suburb of Auckland. They're now filtering all the men, all the military-aged males, away from the women and children. So, yeah, and now what's going to happen here, and this is both a good thing and a bad thing, right? The media is going to focus on these protests, and they're not necessarily focusing on the reason why people are protesting, what's happening over there. This is kind of a similar thing. I saw this mentioned with the protests against the Vietnam War, is rather than covering the war crimes that were being committed there, the atrocities, the civilian deaths, and all of that sort of thing, they started focusing on how un-American the protesters were.
Well, I mean, like, it's a very, very different scenario and much more serious what you're talking about, but it is actually exactly what we just talked about with TVNZ polls. They're focusing on how it was delivered rather than the information. Completely different ballpark for serious nature, but it's what people then do.
Yeah, and it'll divide. You know, like why are these people in universities? You know, it's not just the students; it's the faculties as well.
Yep.
The universities, the way that they operate, the way that they maintain their what's the word? You know, their money, their endowments, all of that sort of thing. It is investments, and it is donations from alumni and that sort of thing. And some of their alumni that might be very big donors, they might be big money individuals, they might not agree with what the protesters have to say. So they'll be pulling donations. It'll be harming their investments.
There is this
that
other
sort of
part.
thing.
There is this other part as well, and I've just brought up some video. I haven't queued this up, but there was that also the lecturers, staff and stuff getting involved in the protest. And there was that famous one from the last week or so where academic staff was standing around groups of protesters who were praying. Now, I haven't queued this up. I don't know if this is exactly the right one, but that's what I Googled and I got this footage. And that started the shockwaves coming through people about, you know, Jewish people are being blocked from coming onto campus because of these protests and stuff. And then it had to be pointed out that a huge percentage of the people who are protesting are Jewish people. So there are Israeli people, Jewish if they have the faith, I guess. But there's also that element which is doing it. I also emailed we're not going to get them, I guess, but emailed one of the academics who was arrested at one of these events as well for protesting and trying to protect students from the police arresting them by just circling them, staying around them, and trying to put a buffer, for want of a better word, between the protesters and the police. And so that's been happening as well. So you're just talking about losing funds, but it's kind of a side note. But I think it's probably a little bit like Robertson. Sorry, his first name just jumped out of my head. Minister of Finance that's just moved on.
Oh, Grant Robertson.
Grant Robertson, who's now the Chancellor or whatever it's called for Otago University. I think I read a story today where 4 funders have said they're not going to give money to Otago University
I did
anymore.
I was holding this in reserve for later on in the show, but
but it kind of ties into, if you're not, like, do we therefore have to get rid of these people because of the funders? Or, I mean, New Zealand's a bit different, right? We don't need hundreds of millions of dollars from funders to run our universities, but but the university's gone, oh well, which is kind of the right response.
Can I go on a wee tangent here?
Yeah, do it on.
Tangent time. So, for those of you that are unaware, Grant Robertson is becoming the Chancellor or Vice Chancellor of Otago University. And the ODT has been running a series of stories about that. ODT being, of course, New Zealand's most trusted newspaper. And almost with breathless abandon, some of the stories have covered how much Grant Robertson's going to be paid. It's actually more than what he would be paid as finance minister. And the fact that there's been complaints that he is he is coming into that job, including a headline that was like, donors cancelling donations in the wake of Grant Robertson being approved.
I've
Now,
got it up
when
to it. It says 4 donors to stop support for
yeah,
uni.
but that wasn't the first headline. It was donors protesting, right? And then it
Right.
became 4 donors. And then there's a bit more. Yeah, you won't be able to because it's the ODT.
Behind the wall.
Then it turned out that those 4 donors that were pissed, do you know when they last donated?
No.
The most recent donation from one of those 4 was 1995.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And as far as his pay packet, Grant's already on record saying that he doesn't need that much money and he will use it to establish a series of scholarships. So, yay, ODT.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we were distracted a bit from the conversation around the
Tangent
protests.
time. Look, when it comes to these student protests, you know, we hear it all the time. America is the land of the free. Freedom of speech, bastion, pillar of our society, all of that sort of thing. And it's funny when that comes up when you have uniformed Nazis marching in the street and the police can't do anything. But the moment the students have a sit-in, wow, look what we've found. We've found out where we keep all our riot gear.
Yeah.
Our fire extinguishers full of pepper spray.
Yeah.
All of our long battens. You know, we're going to get the fire department involved so we can come in through the second floor window. Oh, you get real creative then, don't you?
Yeah. Let's just continue this story because this is the second part of the same story, but it's talking about what's happening in Auckland and other parts of the world to support what's happening in America.
Meanwhile, the protest movement's now spreading around the world, with students rallying across the UK, France, Italy, Canada, Australia and here in support of Palestinians caught up in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Corazon Miller is at Auckland University. How's it looking there, Corazon?
Look, it is a big crowd here tonight. At its peak, there would have been more than 250 people who had gathered, not just Palestinians, but members of the wider Auckland community who'd come here to stand in solidarity and express their very real concern for the humanitarian crisis they see happening in Gaza.
Look at that flag in the
Organisers had
background,
initially
Pat.
indicated that they wanted to set
The flag
up
in the
camp here
background.
overnight.
Yeah, someone's got a tena ring a tera playing a flag in Palestinian colours.
The important thing they want to know is that they are angry, they
Didn't see
are
that.
frustrated
It's
that
cool.
after months and
Yeah,
months of
it's-
getting
it's
out there
just
on the
behind
streets
this reporter.
and protesting, that those in power who have the
Oh, there.
ability to make that change
Just behind
don't
your head.
seem to be
Yep.
listening.
We're standing in solidarity with the students in Gaza who have had to stop their education, not by choice, just because of the complicit genocide going on.
We are calling for the basic human rights. The rights to access their home, the rights to access food and water.
Obviously, we're on different sides of the spectrum here, although at the same time, we do want the same things. We want peace in the Middle East.
And that's I mean, as far as a Jewish voice at Auckland University, don't know what his views are and don't know how hard he'd go personally, but that was an okay response, you know, looking for peace in the Middle East. So you can't ask for much more than that, I guess.
Palestinians are like our brothers. In Sudan, we share a very similar struggle. Currently, there's a war in Sudan, so we understand how it feels to be helpless.
Look, we did reach out to the New Zealand government today. A spokesman from Winston Peters' office, the foreign minister, said New Zealand has repeatedly backed those calls for a ceasefire, and they're expressing serious concerns about what they see happening in Gaza and would like to see a more permanent long-term solution for peace. But in terms of the word genocide, have said they are being guided by the United Nations, by the International Criminal Court of Justice. It so far has said it's plausible that genocide is happening on the ground in Gaza, has urged Israel to do more to improve the humanitarian situation. But for those gathered here tonight, that's simply not good enough. They say that every minute those politicians spend debating terminology, that's more lives that are being lost.
The thing I wanted to mention as well, and someone's just brought this up. I don't really remember 1981. Sort of little kid, you know, wasn't really a part of my world. Dad liked rugby, you know, didn't have any knowledge of it. But as you grow up and as you start to learn about what did happen and what it was about, I get the vibe, and I've put this comment up on purpose because of the apartheid Israel roots from the British imperialism. When I'm watching those protests and when I'm hearing what the protesters are saying, it feels like free Nelson Mandela. it's got that vibe to it. It's got that feels like end apartheid in South Africa. And and obviously there's some similarities you can draw there. In fact, we even talked about this last week about, you know, peace and reconciliation and that sort of thing. But hearing the protesters talk in America, it just, if you close your eyes and you took out some of the reference points, it would be sounding like people talking in the 80s about South Africa. That was the vibe it gives me.
Yeah, I mean, I have no recollection of that because I was just a little wee baby. I mean, I remember participating in protests against the Second Gulf War as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But here in Dunedin, there has been a regular Saturday morning or Saturday
I think it's 1 o'clock
rally.
Yeah.
Every week, almost without fail, since this whole thing kicked off.
Yep.
And I can't think of anything that has really rivaled that in Dunedin, in my memory.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think this has really shone. I think Israel's going to be feeling the hangover for this for years and years and years.
Yeah.
They have traded. I think they've done some real damage to, I guess, the protection that they've historically had for their actions, and the way that they run their country. It has really shone a very bright floodlight on the apartheid system that they've set up against the Palestinians in the West Bank. It has opened them up to some strong criticism from the public on their actions and their overreactions and the massive disproportionate response that they've had. And when we talk about I said, Jesus Christ, when we're talking about, the UN sort of coming out and going, well, we believe there might be some genocide going on. It's plausible.
Yeah.
Like the machinery of international politics and diplomacy is always very slow moving. And it is incredibly frustrating when it's like, you just want to go, So the systemic bombing of hospitals, education, housing, food, relief working, water infrastructure, that's not genocide. Wiping out an entire generation, cutting them off from healthcare and education, that's not genocide.
Yeah.
Okay. It's frustrating to see that because you just want to shake the tree and go, it fucking is, because look at it.
Yeah.
Like, how could it not be?
Yeah.
And it frustrates me to my core because every time something fucking monstrous happens in this world, we sort of take stock and we go, oh, never again. And it's fucking happening again.
Yeah.
You go, what have we learnt? It takes too long to stop this.
There's one other part about this whole what's going on, and it might not be the most important part. I acknowledge that, but it is a part. And May the 17 has just reminded me of the idea of blame Joe Biden. What's happening in these universities, and I'm not saying blame Joe Biden necessarily, but what's happening in these universities is there are a bunch of millennial and Gen Z voters who are going to be needed by Joe Biden at the end of this year to keep out Donald Trump, who could very, 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 very easily be coming more sour towards him. And things like this might flow on into these people not voting for Joe Biden. Now, I'm never the kind of person that goes, you must vote for this person to keep that person out. No one's entitled to your vote. Politicians have to earn your vote without question. So I wouldn't take that line of, you're to blame if Trump gets in because you didn't vote for Biden. No, Biden needs to earn your vote. And if he doesn't earn it, that's on him. But what's going on at the moment, the progressive left in America and the younger generations who support them are moving away from Biden. And that could be an issue for the rest of America for the next 4 years at the end of this year.
Yeah, so there's the immediate fallout there. Imagine if he, well, first of all, you have to make the assumption that they were going to vote at all.
Yeah.
And I would hope that they're this politically active that they would have.
Yeah.
I would say in their shoes, you can dislike Biden all you like. You have to hold your nose and fucking vote for him because the other guy is worse. And then the second part of what you need to do is the longer term thing of look at the structure of the Democrat Party, look at the structure of the fact that it's a two-party system. Look at what the Republicans are doing by putting up the worst example that they could have. There's no one better that they want to put up. And they need to shake the foundations of that system.
But they never do that.
They never do that. They become disengaged and they're like, the system doesn't give a shit about me. I can't move the needle. I'm out. I don't want to vote for this guy when I know he's shipping weapons to Israel at one hand and going, we don't like the situation over there. On the other hand, like it's what the US is doing writ large. Like at the moment, they're sending an enormous amount of military aid to Israel, while the US Navy is building a floating pier to get aid into the Gaza Strip. And it's like, well, you've got to bob each way. Pick a side.
The thing is, they never do that, and because they never do that. In other words, they never... I mean, the system needs to be burnt to the ground, right? The American system. And unless they let it get burnt to the ground, it's never going to be fixed. And the argument of they have to hold their nose and vote for Biden because Trump is worse means they then won't fix it. I've probably used this example before. When I worked in a radio station, ZB it was, we had newsreaders. And the newsreaders used to record the news to a digital reel-to-reel, DRR. So the old style had those reels spun around and you record them. This is all digitally. And I can remember the main newsreader in the News Talk ZB studios. So he'd record all the news that would go out on the other radio stations and then he'd do it live on ZB. And sometimes the digital reel-to-reel, the DRR, would fail. And he could fix it. Like he could go in and go, shit, it's failed. I'll go in and I'll re-record it and I'll upload it manually. But he chose not to because he knows that if he continued to fix the error, the company would never pay to get it fixed. So he let news bulletins go out that he knew were corrupt because he wanted to force the hand of the management to fix it. And I think the longer and it's not really we have a different system, but the longer Americans hold their nose and vote for the person they don't want, the longer it's going to take for the system to change. Now, I know what that means. You could have a fascist in 10 months' time. Not saying it's easy. And I know what's happening is I'll go, well, just do it this time. Just do it this time to keep Trump out. You know, DeSantis will be up next time. And he's like Trump, only he got a bit of a higher IQ. You know, it's like at some stage, it's got to burn to the ground. Easy to say, hard to do. And if they keep holding their nose and voting, they're going to keep getting what they've got right now. And maybe it's an impossible choice, but those are the choices.
This segment has been brought to you by the movie Civil War, now in theatres.
Shall I lighten up? I can lighten it up a bit. Shall I lighten it up a bit?
Go on. Oh, it's that fellow, convicted fraudster, Damien
best
Grant.
friend.
We're buddies.
We're going long tonight. That's all right. We'll whip through this, and you'll enjoy what you'll enjoy. So let's have a look at the working group last night. And this is quite a short clip. It's a minute for actually all the I've got 4 clips. They're all quite short. They're about a minute and a half each. I just wanted to play this because I knew you'd enjoy this one, Chewy. This is Damien Grant making up facts to suit his own narrative and being called out for it.
There was not a single nurse, there was not a single doctor, there was not a single policeman.
We've just removed $100 million from the hospital budget in order to maintain balance.
Yeah, but that was $100 million that was probably jacked up in the last 6 months of the last government. This idea that they're slashing...
Do you have any evidence for that, Damien, or is that just a statement?
It's just a statement.
There you go.
This is the word.
It's the word probably. It's Damien Grant going, it's probably all Labor's fault. Can you prove that? No. We'll just keep going. We'll get to the end of this point as well, because Damien Grant has said about no nurses, no doctors, no nothing are going to be losing their jobs. And Craig Rennie has gone, so where are they finding the $100 million from then? That's where we're at so far.
entire thing is based on his statement.
So that's my point.
Vibe.
It's a bit. It's going to say,
But I mean, has there been? Well, no. This is your statement. Has there been a single doctor or nurse that has left as a result of budget cuts since this government came into office?
I would say that there's probably
You would
plenty. There's
say
probably plenty of doctors and nurses.
That is not a yes or a no.
They're not going to be able to do their job because no one's doing the paperwork in the background.
Also, if they're going to Australia, as many of them are,
why are they moving to Australia?
Because the pay is better
right,
over there.
Okay, so break it down. The reason why they move, why can Australia...
So this is the libertarian argument. Of course the pay is better because the economy is richer. The economy does better. It's a chicken and egg argument. It's the cart before the horse. So he'll say, we're not going to pay them anymore until we get a better economy, whereas the other person will be saying the economy is better, so they get paid more. And it goes round and round and round and round and round.
Pay more
because we've got a deunionised workforce that hasn't done far enough.
Hold on. No. If they have a deunionised workforce and they're paying more in Australia, then what does that tell you?
We have a deunionised workforce.
We have a deunionised workforce.
That's why they're able to go over there and get better
deals. Because they have fair pay agreements that actually help to deliver the pay for sustainable goods like that.
That is absolute nonsense. You can have a fair trade agreement in Kenya. It's not going to do any good. The reason why there are higher wages in Australia is a wealthier country. That's it. That's why. There's no other reason why. And the union and the unions make absolutely no goddamn difference at the end of the day.
You're dead right. Australia is a wealthier country. It also has fair pay agreements. It also has a much more progressive taxation system and a capital gains tax.
And do you think all those things make it a wealthier country?
I have no idea, but I'm prepared to give it a bash.
I'm prepared to give it a bash, yes, Craig Rennie. Let's play a couple other clips as we're going through. And Chewy, you can jump in and comment on that. It's clip number 2 from the show. Was actually Bomber going off. It's quite a cool clip to see Bomber when he gets a full head of speed up, talking about the anti-vaxxer brigades that are currently supporting Winston Peters. And that's really all the introduction you need. You'll enjoy this. He had a head of speed up on this one.
Quick round. The danger of Winston seducing the anti-vax crowd is that they are only sated by a Nuremberg trial where Jacinda and the front bench of the Labour Party are hanged outside Parliament.
And the media.
Oh yeah. Will Winston have to step up the media are all bribed big lie, or will it be some conspiracy about Maori secretly making another COVID virus that only infects Pākehā? Thoughts?
There's no question there. That is just another deranged Martin Bradbury rant with absolutely nothing behind it.
Winston Peters has been doing the media a bribed big lie because he needs to give his crazy anti-vax Swamp Kingdom nutters something to breathe in. And if you actually look at what those people are saying online,
which people?
They are his supporters, his anti-vax supporters,
but it's not
Voices
him.
for Freedom, who are working inside the New Zealand First machinery now, who are actually part of the legislative process, who pushed for the WHO to not be ratified and not signed because apparently they're all part of some global cabal.
Is there a question
global cabal?
Is there a question anywhere in this? I think to Craig's point that yes, there is a real problem that this government has. And speaking to some of the ministers there, it is a frustration that New Zealand First is a handbrake. And because New Zealand First
isn't it funny that Damien Grant is talking about Winston Peters being a handbrake as a negative, whereas Winston Peters has been got elected by saying I will be the handbrake and keep them in check, and he's being a handbrake according to
that's
Damien
been his
Grant.
thing for over a decade.
Yeah, for sure. All right, do you want to speak to anything yet, or I've got a couple more clips as well. It's enjoyable. Did you enjoy that? Do you like seeing Bomber with a full head of steam up there?
I mean, it was very unhinged, but yes, I do. I do agree. I do enjoy. Look, it's funny how it's always the same with Damien. Is like he can go off on some unhinged tangent, some ridiculous hypothetical, but as soon as somebody else does, that's not playing a straight bat.
Where's the question?
I mean, I've seen some of the comments to convicted for us to Damien Grant's columns in the paper. And he should know these unhinged people. They're his audience as well. So he can play that sort of thing of like, oh no, I'm a learned intellectual coming from a libertarian point of view.
Yeah.
But there's a Venn diagram in there of the people that think Winston's right to talk about the WHO. And the people that say socialism would never work, but libertarianism definitely will. I'm going to be a lord, not a serf.
I'm just going to pour myself a drink. The other thing that I found quite terrifying about that little commentary by Bomber was the idea of the Voices for Freedom fuckwits being involved in the legislation, the inner workings of New Zealand First. Now, I also came across this on Twitter today. The lovely Dudley Benson, who does a lot of sort of background work and looks into this sort of thing. People in Dunedin probably know him best as one of the men who owns Wolf, said this. Update, 3 days in, far-right Reality Check Radio's website now states it has raised 71% of its 480 goal in 1 week. I've now heard via a close source that the three founders, Voices for Freedom's Claire Deeks, Alia Bland and Libby Johnson, each aim to receive a $100,000 salary from RCR. So that 480K that they're raising, according to insiders talking to Dudley, sounds like 3/5 of that is going to be to pay the 3 of the disinformation 12, Chewy. The allegations, and we put them out there as anonymous sources with no evidence to back that up. But
now,
those two things together.
While we were crowing about, Rabbit Hole Radio being big off here and crying poor for money, there was a voice in the back of my head going, this is a rather excellent grift opportunity to really tighten the screws and really ramp up the urgency to get money rolling in. And, almost straight from the get-go, they had a dollar for dollar matching thing. They were always going to achieve this somehow.
Well, I don't know.
It's a great branding and advertising opportunity.
The next part of the conversation on the podcast was then actually after Bomber and Damien Grant argued over things for a while. The lovely Craig Rennie came in and actually answered the question.
What crazy thing is Winston going to
use
next?
I actually think there's something in your question, so stay with me, which is that Winston needs conflict.
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
That New Zealand First needs conflict. It's how it garners votes. When it has gone out of Parliament, it's gone out of Parliament having been in government, having to defend its actions. And so Winston stops being Deputy Prime Minister in, I don't know how many, a year, a little over a year now.
Yeah.
He needs conflict after that point in order to say, I would have done it differently if I'd been re-elected. As a consequence, you need to do this for me.
Yeah,
and that conflict is the thing that he needs.
I wondered, however, and that has been proven time and time again because he has been tossed out. But you kind of think age 79 or so, a little bit south of Biden in the United States and wearing a hell of a lot better. But you kind of wonder at some point, because there is no real heir apparent.
Excuse me.
Who's that name?
I know. Just want to put it
Caught
out
in
there.
the act.
I know. Cheaters.
Right.
Will National throw a seat?
Yeah.
I would think it would be the logical thing to do. So if you did get 4%, you had a seat, you were back anyway.
That's how they get their agenda. Right? Well, because I think Winston's problem is that I don't think that Shane Jones and Cassie Costello and who's that Wellington mayor?
Andy Foster.
Andy Foster. Those guys do not want to go to an early election.
No, they won't.
So in exactly the same way as he tried to bring down, was it Jenny Shipley or somebody else? Tauhena and all the rest defected, right?
Yeah, but you can't do that now under the current rules.
The Waka jumping.
Under the Waka jumping.
Yeah.
So there you go. So Craig actually answered it in quite a clever way. And there is one more clip, unless you'd like to speak to anything now. The last clip is... can Luxon reign in Seymour? They had a bit of a debate around that.
No.
Just get for that.
Big play button. Go.
And this is actually, remember last night I said I flicked over and watched the live and I heard Damien Grant. Sorry, do you want to add his title? Because you always like to add his title.
He's got many, but the one I like to go back to is Convicted Fraudster. Damien
Right,
Grant.
I've heard that too. Actually said something I agreed with, and this is about how Luxon's got no control whatsoever. So this is the conversation. Can Luxon reign in Seymour in particular?
72 hours after warbling about how tough Luxon was in sacking Melissa and Penny, David Seymour was contradicting him and telling him, journalists, he couldn't sack any ACT MP like that. How much more undermining can Luxon put up with before he has to rein your mate David in?
Well, he can't reign in Seymour, nor can he reign in Winston Peters, because they are in a coalition. But I don't see that as being necessarily fatal to Luxon. I think if Luxon just has to play the cards that he's dealt, and like I was saying before, because both Seymour and Peters have their own kind of worldview, and they're quite good at articulating it.
Very good.
Luxon doesn't have an alternative to go out there, and so he's not going out there explaining to the public what he wants and why should we do this thing? Where is the destination? Where is this bus going?
Yeah.
I don't think he needs a vision, but at the very least he needs to say this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. And he doesn't have that. And if he did, I don't think it would matter what the two wings would do, because he could say, we're going to do this thing, we're going to do A, B, and Z, and this is the outcome that we're going to get. And he's not doing it, and he needs to.
Follow-up question, what number does National need to drop to where Luxon's leadership is in trouble? They're 34 at the moment in the internal Labour, 36 in this latest poll. Where do they need to drop?
I don't think National is going to think like that. I think National, to be fair to National, they've got an idea about what they want to do. It's fairly narrow from my perspective. It's not particularly ambitious, but they have an idea where they want to go to, and people like Pink and Bishop and so forth, they're on board and they know where they're going. They've got a pretty good relationship going with ACT, a bit more of a complex relationship with New Zealand First. I actually don't think that's, and if they fall to in the high 20s, I don't think they're going to panic. They know what they're doing. That might change, a year out from an election, but no, I don't think that's on their horizon.
Quick round, how long?
There you go. So that's there's not a heck of a lot in there that I think he is wrong on from the perspective. He's got no control.
No, I've got a lot of criticisms, but not.
And I don't think that Luxon's going anywhere. I don't think that if it did drop to the high 20s or something. One of the interesting points from the podcast that I didn't show a clip for is one of the points that got made a couple of times, and I think from Fran O'Sullivan made it, is if at some point they're going to need to make a decision that if they are projecting a tough election next time around and maybe a one-term government, they can get a lot done in one term, and maybe they need to go harder to set things in motion for 3 years rather than think about 6 or 9. And that was mentioned a couple of times. That's an interesting and frightful experience. Maybe that would imply they're not going hard enough right now, Chewy, that they may need to pick up on it and push harder.
I saw a comment, I highlighted it last night, we didn't get to it, but it was an interesting theory that the government is front-loading so much bullshit into the start of their first term that they get it out of the way.
Right.
People's memories are short, right? We'll hopefully forget about all of it by the next election.
Right.
I think if it comes to the next election, look, Luxon likes being a leader. He likes to position himself as an effective leader.
Yeah.
I think it also looks like a butt plug, I'm just going to say. And this is just a theoretical mental exercise. If he was to lose the next election, that glorious happy day where I'm instantly drunk, do you think he's the type of leader that will take his lumps, stay on and rebuild? Or do you think he would fall on his sword and bugger off because he's not going to get a knighthood?
I still think what we said last year, that if he was to lose last year, he wouldn't stick around. Who the hell wants to be looking for a knighthood and have to sit 3 years in opposition to do it, and then try and sit for 6 years in government to get there, when you can just basically retire, work part-time on various boards and live a luxurious life? I can't imagine he'd want to stick around, but could be wrong.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
And every time we mention them being a one-term government, that is extremely unusual for New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it did happen, I mean, that philosophy that they were talking about on the podcast of they need to get a lot done now. In other words, change the plan from a 9-year or a 6-year to a 3-year and see what you can get done. Because, I mean, like Labour, when they had a majority for the first time ever, they could have done whatever they liked, other than constitutional issues which require 75% in the House. But they could have done whatever they liked, and many of us would say they wasted an opportunity. with Luxon alongside. I mean, I guess if Winston is the handbrake, I mean, gosh, is this blasphemy of what I'm about to say? Are some of us grateful that Winston is there as a handbrake? Would it be so much more worse if it was just a two-headed Taniwha? I feel dirty saying that. I want to go have a shower now, but is that actually a truth?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the trap for people like us and those of us in the chat that are really engaged in this process and game out every possible action and really comment on how good and bad things are. That's us, and we're an edge case when it comes to this. What about the person that just reads the odd headline every now and then, that catches the poll results once every 8 months or just in the lead up to the election, or makes their mind up on the day?
Yeah.
Like, that always catches people like us out. It's like, oh shit. So the message that had cut through was not the one that I thought was the most important thing.
Yeah.
So that's just, when you're talking to people that are in that camp, it's educating. It's trying to build a team to get the result that you want. But I think there's a lot of work that gets so far away, but also is not that far away, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to point out how this government has caused a net negative effect on everybody's life. And at this stage, they won't have seen it. And it feels horrible to say this, but I hope that people do notice that in coming year, too.
Yeah. Yep. All right. A few super chats that have come in. Mike, thank you for your $5 super chat. C. Seymour is backing down on cutting school lunches. I haven't read that yet. I will go do some research on that tomorrow. And saying funding them for a limited time isn't a fiscal cliff, but it was when Labor did it. Yeah, this is news to me, Mike. You're completely right.
So this to me reeks of what we've talked about. Well, you've mentioned a couple of times of like university fees.
Yep.
And you mention a big number, you get people angry, and then you back down a little bit, but you're still chipping away at what you want to chip away at.
Yep. Yep. No, 100%. So in other words, for people who don't know, we used to get told, oh, there's a 10% increase coming in funds, and we'd all go, what? And then we'd protest and they'd say, oh, okay, well, it's only going to be 5%. And all the morons would be celebrating, not realizing that it's still a 5% increase. They think they've just saved 5%, but it's still a 5% increase. Right. Story here. Seymour confirms temporary funding for free school lunches. Story up 48 minutes ago.
Because he's been getting smacked around the head with this since he's tried it.
Yeah.
Got to keep up the pressure.
Yep, we'll have a look at that for tomorrow. From Nick, thank you for the super chat. Following Luxon Grimace, how can we please have Nicola Willis as the Hamburglar? That's a really good idea. With a plate of tax cuts. It's a really good idea. Burglarizing. I like it. Kermit the convicted fraudster, genocidal supported frog. Okay. That's a word salad there. We've got that out there, Mr. Arvis. Thank you for your super chat. We've got Nate who says, I heard convicted fraudster Davia Graham loves Seymour, who I also heard is the worst example of a human being. It's going to keep going and going, that, isn't it? Thank you for the super chat, Nat. And last one for tonight, so don't do any more, people. Gold says, the rumor I heard was that even people high up in the Atlas network think David Seymour is a terrible example of humanity, even by their standards. All right, guys. You're just putting the nail in our coffin that we're never ever going to get him on. Hey, never ever. We'll see. There'll be a place for him if he wants to come and talk to some terrible woke tards, like as we are, Chewy. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight, team. Great show. I appreciate you all being with us. Thank you so much for being a part of what we do. We will be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Well, I will be back probably with a guest host because Chewy's going off to Wellington to see the band called
Amigo the Devil.
Amigo the Devil. We want some video. Take some video and share it on Monday. That's what's going on.
Look, this might not be everybody's cup of tea, right? But I urge you guys to jump on YouTube, type in Amigo the Devil, Cocaine and Abel, and watch that video. And come back and mention it in the Discord or on the YouTube comments after this. And tell me how hard that song hit you. It is an emotional gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
Cocaine and Abel, Amigo the Devil.
We won't put the sound on because it'll get us pulled. There you go.
Go and listen to it after the show. It's amazing.
All right, team. Love you bits. We will see you in a wee while. In fact, we'll see you in about 22 and a half hours for the last episode for the week. Thank you for being a part of us tonight. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate you all, and we'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.